All right, I believe we're live. I'm wondering how everybody's day is going because we have a lot of ice and snow being delivered around the country. And our office is centrally located here in Houston. Well, not in Houston, north of Houston. And I know people getting, it's getting where there's ice everywhere and power's in and out, internet and other things. And I know they're stretching all the way up to the East Coast. So if you're out there, stay safe. All right, so a few introductions. I am the owner of Section8Consulting.com. I work with clients up to about 1,000 a year, sometimes a few hundred landlords across the states, all 50. And we work with clients to deal with housing related issues. We consult, okay? There's no magic to vouchers. Anybody can pull out an application. It's just understanding the fundamentals of where you can get these, the speed in which you can get them, whether or not you've got great preferences, and so on, could ultimately lead into quicker times. Okay, so not trying to sell anybody a fantasy or rainbows with this. What I like to do is cover some of the essential services that we kind of offer because I know a lot of people ask. So we deal with emergency housing assistance, and we have, especially during the pandemic, a lot of people don't understand where to get it, how to get it, and who had an emergency housing voucher. And those come through continuum of care and housing first programs. In most case, in most cases, in most cities, that is not delivered through your local PHA or public housing authority. It is delivered through separate programs called continuum of care. We also deal with, well, at one point we were dealing with emergency rental assistance, assisting clients there, Section 8 housing, the application, eligibility, vouchers. Also dealing with the wait list. There are a lot. So let's talk about that a little bit. Since October, as you may know, September through about March, sometimes April, is a great time because there's less applicants on the market, and so that cuts down the wait list, I guess, about 50%. Then you start moving past March and April, and you get into the heavier times during the summer. I guess humans tend to be a lot more climatic about wanting to move, and of course, summer is always a great time to do it. And then, of course, there's that great demand for vouchers. We also have had many discussions about portability, moves and portability, and the process you have to go through to move vouchers, whether you're just receiving it in your town or in another city or state. I know a lot of you contact us about harassment, discrimination, other issues related to public housing authorities, and so on. And as many of you know, your local public housing authority is either privately owned or owned by the city. And whenever there's problems with them, those problems are something that you'd be reporting to HUD because HUD is a federal administrator of funds. It does not give out vouchers. HUD's in DC. HUD's got regional offices. And so when there's discrimination, harassment, you'd be talking with them or FHEO, which is known as Fair Housing, or the Office of the AOIG, which would be somebody else that could help you in those related issues. To a certain degree, we offer case management and research, especially for those landlords that want to understand the fundamentals of the market, whether or not they can absorb vouchers and other clients, and for clients themselves that are dealing with this. I think case management goes into the angle of discussing whether or not they're coming at the right approach, reaching out to enough places for housing choice vouchers, and whether or not they would qualify for some of the vouchers that may be funded by Section 811, Section 202, and then distinguishing the factors between dealing with a public housing authority, which may have project-based housing or housing choice vouchers, and then you have a whole different system where you have private landlords they're involved in Section 42, which may be a property that is what we call tenant-based or subsidized. And then the third angle being your continuum of care programs, offering emergency housing, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. So they're all different things. Then there's those that are looking more in the subsidy and affordable housing and so on, and low income housing, which are all different. They're all the same thing, but they all go under subsidies. And that stuff doesn't, there's no magic involved in that. They either have an available unit, you give about half your income up to anywhere from half to 70%, and then that's that. There's no voucher really involved in most cases. Then you have specific types of housing that we try to address. Now we have, for those veterans, that be programs that run under HUD-VASH, BAWA for domestic violence housing and related funding, HOPA for housing opportunities for persons with AIDS or HIV. Rapid rehousing, which is more temporary. Perm supportive housing for those struggling with mental health issues and other things that may require more wraparound resources. And then, of course, to those that may be coming out of jails, prisons, or off the streets for being homeless. Beyond that, again, there are subsection properties under subsidies like Section 202, Section 811. And to get into an idea about what that could be, Section 202 is a person, what we call 202 is for seniors, 62 and older. In some cases, it may extend down to age 55, 55 and up. Now, for your NEDs or non-elderly vouchers, you're looking at Section 811 or the mainstream voucher or the housing choice voucher, all being pretty much the same, which is a person with disability that's between the age of 18 and 61. That was a mouthful, right? Good afternoon, LL. I see you joined the channel today. How are you? And it looks like you have a question. If you have a felony, do you qualify for ultra low income housing? Well, it depends, So it depends what now if you're an SO or a sex offender, if you've had a conviction for methamphetamines, or you've done some other behavior that would be considered an assault against a human being, um, an aggravated crime, then probably not. And other considerations is strictly up to the management at the subsidy property as to whether or not you would meet the criteria for living safely in the property. Now, would a conviction or a criminal activity under 5 years qualify? Probably not. Those over five, then I don't see how that would fundamentally change the outcome of whether or not you receive a voucher if you went that angle. But again, it depends on the type of crimes and the threshold well, I shouldn't say threshold, I should say the policies and procedures for that specific housing authority and whether or not they find that acceptable. But in most cases, um, convictions don't have a direct effect on whether or not you would get housing. Okay, it only has a direct effect on whether or not a person wants to rent to you. So, all right, so I'm going to move over a little bit. I'm talking about for the landlord section. Let's see here. So now, some of the things we handle, I guess, with landlords is, beyond the consulting and professional advice, trying to assist with landlord packets, housing authority incentives, owner certifications, your typical standard documents, taxpayer, and also your HAP contracts, management agreements, tenancy addendums, HQSs, rent reasonableness, tenant eligibility and rent procedures, family obligation agreements, and RFTAs or request for tenancy packets, payment standards, housing discrimination, deficiencies request for HQS certification dates, notice of contract termination, move in and move out, forms and inspections and termination, and notice of intent to vacate. So it kind of covers the full broadband of that. And then let's talk about specific things that there's a fundamental understanding for. And again, guys, you can ask whatever you'd like while we're in the video. This helps me burn a little bit of time on the video before I have afternoon consults. So what I'm going to do is go over to our channel real quick, and I want to show you. Well, I wish I could show you in a live video, but they don't allow me to show it. But what I am going to do is grab some information, which I can talk to you guys about, and I think you might find a bit useful. So let's talk about experience and other things. People want to know, fundamentally, what do you know? How do you know it? And how is that going to be useful to me if I ever decided to utilize services from a company like ours or another? So our experience encompasses, including reading probably tens of thousands of housing authority and continuum of care manuals, operations, policies, procedures, data manuals, covering everything from Section 8 applications, operations, policies, procedures, assessment tools, HMIS, algorithmic data manuals on every piece of HUD and housing legislation written on the matter, including subsections of Code of Federal Regulation, and also almost everything read over the last 2 decades. So I would say it encompasses just about everything. Then, of course, we pulled a little bit more information because of our natural, I guess, ties to housing authorities and former past and employees of housing authorities that have been beneficial in the understanding of the process of many housing authorities around the U.S. So they kind of feed information in a legal manner. So, I think over that course of time, you look at 22 years and you look at millions and millions of pages of operations, procedures, pages, and then you deal with Cumberland Nana McKay, which shall write and underwrite the policies, procedures for all these housing authorities. You get a fundamental understanding how it works. And anything, just like any lovely game, if you learn what it's about, then you have a fundamental way to probably probe it and break it, which means you can navigate it better than most people do, or have the time to do so and research and watch videos. Um, goes on to say privately owned HUD funded. So with that, it would be up to the management there as to whether or not they want to accept a convicted felon. Okay. HUD Thomas Hutchkin. I am not a veteran, by the way, nor do I have a criminal record. Well, that's good. And looks like Joanne Maria, if you already have Section 8 voucher and you're 50 with a disability, do you qualify for another type of voucher? Well, at that age, I would suggest to you, a lot of people think that it's qualifying for vouchers. When you fill out an application and you give your answers in principle about what they're talking about, then if they have funding under specific subsections of Code of Federal Regulation, like let's say for Section 811, they could be an 811 funded building, and it just means you have your application and so on has the ability to have you selected for that string of funding. But a voucher is just a voucher. It's just how it's funded. So I would suggest to you that the likely consideration for you, Joanne, would be a mainstream voucher or Section 811 because you're under 62. We don't know what else is in your case, and nor should you publicize that here in the channel, but I would suggest to you that yes, you have probably a good opportunity there. Let's talk about qualifying disabilities real quick. There's a long-standing understanding, and I think that when it comes to disability, there are lots of varieties of them. And most of you believe that if you don't receive a disability check, then that doesn't mean it means that you're not disabled. That's not true. A lot of you guys will go into this application, you check that box, I don't believe that I'm permanently disabled. Look, there are a lot of things that are considered disabling that only last a year. I would suggest to you to let your doctor make that decision as to whether or not you have a disability and whether or not it's long term, because a lot of you do have qualifying disabilities. And the in which HUD views, HUD and its policies and rules in the local housing authority is much different than the gravity and weight that you would have to meet if you were going to get a check. So when you go to the Social Security Administration, you complain of disability, you see a judge, a jury, and so on, and they take forever, right? Because they're giving out money. But when you deal with housing, the standard of a disability is quite lower. And a lot of you guys automatically uh, check yourself out of that. And look, qualifying disability is it represents a great portion of where you might land on the list and how quickly you could be considered. Okay. So quit being your own doctors when it comes to that. If you don't know what's qualified and what's not qualified, then talk to a professional or talk to the local housing authority if you can get an answer out of them. I'm going to take a sip of coffee real quick. All right, so I think the countdown is now approaching, as I mentioned in an earlier video. We're January now. We're moving into February. We have about 90 days before we move into what I consider spring and summer. Once we move into spring and summer, uh, the ability to get vouchers is going to be much harder. Okay, let's just be honest. And when we heat it up to June, July, and August, you can forget about it. Okay, it gets difficult. It's one of those times that even my company dreads phone calls because you want to help people, but the reality of it is, during those periods, everybody's just trying to do the same thing. It's almost like a Black Friday sale. You could have gone any time of year to get the voucher, but you decided you prefer standing in a long line to get one. Um, Once we get past the next 90 days, it's going to get incrementally harder, and it's going to reach its height in around June and July, and it's not going to cool up to about September. And then we move into that period again where it gets easier. Remember also the federal budget for a lot of things that are funded in relation to housing and vouchers and so on. The federal budget, a lot of those budgets get burned up pretty good. And when you get nearer and nearer the beginning of the end of the year, they just cook those books, to the end. And so right now we stand in a good position. We've got a lot of housing authorities. You ever wonder why so many housing authorities tend to open up when almost virtually nobody really needs a voucher? It's because it's preferable. Look at all these major housing authorities have been opening, LA and other ones that I can think of off the top of my head. And here they are in the middle of a month where it's cold, it's miserable, nobody wants to move, get a voucher, but yet they're opening. And so I'm anticipating a great deal more. And I think that a lot of us we're going to see a lot more open over the next 30 to 60 days, which is a good thing. It gives you guys many more opportunities to get out there and do this before everybody decides they want to do it. All right, I'm gonna take a breath. So I'm talking quick today, mainly because I think I spun out of control with the coffee pot today, but that's all right. It helps me in the video. Victoria C goes on, hello, and thank you so much for all your help. It's worked for us. Hello, and then Hutch Thomas goes on to say, hello, sir. I'm 50, officially long term. Gotcha. Well, that's good. That might be a good reason to consider a housing voucher. Hutch. Shook Shields. I like that name, Shook. Extension of voucher, what is the max? Now, let me be very clear about vouchers and extensions. They'd have you believe 30 days. In most cases, you can get 90. In exceptional cases, I've seen extensions roll up all the way to 6 months. Who makes that decision? Well, it's the PHA, the local housing authority, and it depends on the type of excuse you're getting, or giving. And I think that medical reasons and other reasons that are related to the health or whether or not you're having mobility, seeing, hearing, feeling, and other issues that could slow you down or ruin your search or even get COVID or something like that could give you a very good cause to be able to get more and more extensions. The maximum number of extensions I've ever seen is 3. The maximum timeline I've seen for extensions in total, all counted for, would be 6 months. I would bet your bottom dollar on 90 days over 6 months. Okay, guys, 6 months would be exceptional. Pat, good afternoon. How are you? If you're on SSI and have a Section 8, can you apply for rent? Apply to apply for your own house. Okay, let me see if I understand. If you're on SSI and have Section 8, can you apply to rent your own home? Look, if you have a Section 8 voucher, you go use you use the voucher to go rent a home. So I don't. The question you're asking, maybe you should ask in a different way because I'm misunderstanding. If you got a voucher, yes, you use that to go rent a home. I'm thinking about how can I apply. See now, when you ask me a question like that, how can I apply? That's about the same as excuse me. How many leaves are on a tree? I'm not saying it's a stupid question, Melinda, but what I'm going to tell you is this: I don't have 15 years to sit here and tell you how the whole system works. Okay. I wish I did. No, I don't actually. So if you need to know how to apply, there are billions of videos on that. If you need professional advice, then you can reach out to us in that regard. But unfortunately, I'm not going to kill 20,000 hours writing that answer. Okay. Victoria C., it took us 4 months to get housing. Will this help? Okay. Well, thank you, Victoria. Uh, Michael Robinson, how can I find out where I'm on the list? In most cases, and unlike the old days, they're not going to publish a number in which where you are. They've gotten away from that, especially in the last 4 to 5 years. So most housing authorities are not going to tell you where you're on the list, and they're not going to give you a number. Only a handful that I'm even aware of even do it anymore. Mainly because people will haunt the hell out of a housing authority if they've got some kind of list. They'll keep calling, they'll keep looking at the website. And when the number doesn't move at all, then it gives them a reason to get unruly and nasty on the phone and this and that. So most housing authorities prefer not to even bring it up or even let you see it. Uh, Pat, Pat goes on. It's called rent to own. Well, it wouldn't matter what it's called. You can utilize that voucher to rent whatever you like. Okay, so long as there's a landlord. Okay, so there's no magic there, Pat. Just take the request for tenancy paperwork that you have, and then you can use it to go rent. Now, if you're trying to go and utilize a voucher to rent your own home, no, that doesn't work that way. Shook, thank you. You're so helpful. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to check the time here because I don't feel like dragging this out today. If anybody has any questions, I would suggest bring them up. I'm also going to post some details about our company if you'd like to speak with us or you're having trouble finding housing, dealing with learning the system, getting your applications in, or you need other education advice, then we'd be happy to help you out there. Moody Girl says, can the landlord be a relative? They can if you're disabled. If the other person is not disabled, then you cannot be their landlord. Okay. That is the only circumstance in which two people that are related by blood, marriage, or so on could live in the same house while one's using a voucher to pay for the rent. Okay. If there's no disability in the house, then there's no chance of that working. So I'm glad you asked that. I don't get asked that a lot. So well, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. I appreciate you guys coming out to visit. This is intended to be a very short video, definitely a lot different than the ones that I usually have that are going for an hour. But I don't have the energy to stay out here today to go through every nook and cranny of every policy and procedure that housing authorities deal with. Hopefully, the next video will have be more focused on an issue of disability because it seems to be a very prevalent issue this year, and it's a big concern to most people as to what to do with the disability, whether or not they have one. And it looks like we have one more comment before I go. Hutch goes on to say, I'm 50, officially disabled long term with a heart condition, living out of my car. I'm not a veteran, nor do I have a criminal record. What voucher should I apply for? You should apply for the mainstream voucher. Okay. And then they'll determine based on whether or not you have an inclusion of homelessness, inclusion of disability, and clearly you're not a senior because you have not reached that age. So you have two important factors for your case. That's certainly true. So you could reach out to the Public Housing Authority for a mainstream voucher under Section 811, or you could go look at continuum of care programs if you want to pursue things like an emergency housing voucher because you're living in the car. Aisha Keller goes on to say, uh, you can find out if your local housing authority has FSS program. If so, you can use a voucher to purchase a home only through the program. So that's called the HUD Home Ownership Program, and that's not offered in very many places anymore. HUD Home Ownership Programs and FSS is contingent on the local community and whether or not they support that program and whether or not there's a lot of availability. And then I think I'll be making a video specifically that because there are a lot of caveats to using FSS, even if it's all from that county. So, all right, guys, I've enjoyed talking with y'all, and y'all have a great day.